Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. I don't remember reaching for the doorknob. I remember the weight of it, cold and heavy in my palm, because I bought it. I picked it out from a catalog Clara circled with a gold pen like she was signing a contract with the universe. Solid brass, she'd said, tapping the page. It feels expensive. It does. Even now. Nico stands 3 feet away from me under the glow of a 12-foot fir, lights blinking like polite lies. My son is 32 and handsome in the careful way expensive haircuts make men handsome. He's wearing the watch I gave him when he graduated from UNM. It used to shine on his wrist like a promise. Tonight it looks like collateral. "Dad," he says, voice low, as if the carpet might tell on him. You're not invited for Christmas this year." There's a smell of something sweet in the air, Clara's fancy candles, amber and vanilla and some French word I can't pronounce. Under it, there's the faint waxy scent of the tree. Under that, something I wish I didn't notice, the ghost of bleach from the housekeeper's afternoon shift. I smell everything when I'm hurt. I always have. It's like my body is searching for proof that I'm still here. I'm not invited, I repeat. The words are soft in my mouth because if I say them loudly they'll punch holes in the drywall. Your old man isn't invited to Christmas in the house Dad, Nico says again, and it's not a warning, not really. It's pleading. Please don't make this harder. I let go of the doorknob. The brass keeps it secret and the door stays open a sliver, letting in a slant of Santa Fe winter air, thin and cold, the kind that makes your breath look like the truth leaving your body. I should close it. I should keep the heat inside the home I helped them buy. I leave it cracked on purpose. In front of the tree? I ask, half a smile, half a wound. You wanted to tell me in front of the tree? Nico's eyes flick toward the kitchen where Clara's laughter is doing what it always does, filling a room like perfume, leaving a residue you can't scrub out. I can see the edge of her quartz island from here. White as a dentist's smile. I paid for that sheen with my hands and 40 years of work, with calluses that have my name carved into them like tree rings. My parents are coming, he says. Clara's parents. They have traditions. We're hosting the Whitfields and the board from the Arts Foundation and I don't fit the picture, I say. I'm not part of the still life. He closes his eyes. He knows how I talk when I'm tired. When his mother died, I learned to make metaphors out of pain so I could hold it without burning myself alive. It became my second trade. It's just this year, he says. Clara's parents. Bryce and Lorraine, I say, because names matter. Names are the hooks truth hangs on. The Whitfields. Old money with new manners. Dad. Do you remember, I ask, and I can't stop myself, in our old place on Agua Fria, when your mother strung popcorn and cranberries because we couldn't afford ornaments? She burned 2 fingers on the thread and didn't cry. I point at the tree, at the perfect ratio of copper to glass. She would have hated this one. It looks like a hotel lobby. Don't, he says, and his voice breaks on the smallness of the word. Don't bring Mom into this. Please. I bring your mother into most things, I say. It's how I can breathe. He opens his mouth, closes it. Somewhere a timer dings and Clara sings, Nico, like the syllables were cut from ribbon. He flinches. He looks at me like a little boy again, like the boy who forgot his lines at the 3rd grade play and scanned the crowd until his father mouthed them from the front row. Tell her, I say, and my voice is so gentle I almost don't recognize it. Tell Clara I'll be fine. Tell her I understand. Tell Bryce and Lorraine happy holidays. Tell them. I stop. My tongue presses against my teeth. I have always been careful. I have always been the man who gets on his knees to reach the baseboard, the man who keeps his temper coiled like a measuring tape. Tell them, I finish, that some traditions are bought on credit. I step backward out of the warm air and into the winter. The doorknob is cold again. It clicks with a sound that's going to live in my chest for a long time. On the drive home, my truck's heater fights the chill, making an old man's wheeze. The sky is that desert pink that makes poets of the uneducated and liars of the wealthy. I pass the bakery that sells empanadas like my mother used to make and a new gallery where the paintings look like someone ironed the sunset wrong. Santa Fe is full of that beauty you can afford if you know how to pretend. I pull into my driveway and the porch light blinks twice before staying on, like it had to think about it. The concrete has a crack that looks like a river delta. I've meant to fix it for 3 years and didn't because I was paying for someone else's water features. I laugh at that thought and the sound scares me. It sounds too loud in the quiet. Inside, the house greets me with what it has left, a photo of Marisol in the hall, her black hair pinned up, smile the size of a sunrise, the wooden bowl Nico made in shop class, uneven and perfect, the smell of coffee trapped in the walls from the years after she died, when I drank 2 pots a day because sleep was a place I didn't want to visit. I put my keys in the small ceramic dish by the door, the dish a shy woman from Chimayo sold me at a craft fair and wouldn't take full price for because she liked my face. My hands are steady. This surprises me. I sit at the kitchen table. The wood is nicked and warm under my palms. I look at the calendar pinned to the bulletin board. December is all red circles and pen scratches, work rotations, reminders to pick up tamales from Rosa's cousin, a note in my own handwriting that says, in capital letters, don't forget to live. I don't cry. It's not pride. It's exhaustion. Tears are a luxury when your life has been an invoice for a decade straight. The phone rings. It doesn't surprise me to see Clara's name, though the tone of the phone seems to change to accommodate her, shriller by half. Sergio, she says, like she's trying on my name and it doesn't fit. Nico tells me you're upset. Accurate, I say. I think you're misunderstanding. My parents aren't. It's not about you. It's about harmony. They have expectations. They appreciate certain kinds of conversation at the table. We can do something with you after. Perhaps the 27th, Nico's schedule is open then and my mother. Clara, I say. I built a business from nothing. I kept men fed for 5 years during the last recession. I buried my wife and didn't break. I know how to talk. She sighs. Please don't make this about pride. You've always had such heart. I admire that. But we're curating a certain guest experience. Curating, I repeat, and the word sticks to my tongue. Like a museum. Exactly, she says brightly, hearing agreement where there isn't any. We're trying to elevate things. And honestly, Sergio, some of your traditions are a bit noisy. All that music and chili Anne. Chili, I correct before I can stop myself. We don't put an I at the end. She laughs a little. You see? This is what I mean. Class matters. Presentation matters. It's not a crime to want dinner to feel refined. What would you like me to bring on the 27th? I ask. My voice is glass. She can't see through it. Oh, she says, suddenly flustered by my accommodation. Well. Perhaps, nothing. We'll handle it. Her cheer returns like a dog to the hand that has always fed it. Merry Christmas, Sergio. She hangs up without waiting for me to return the greeting. After, the house is so quiet it hums. The refrigerator kicks on. A neighbor's wind chime goes unmusical in a gust. The night creaks the way old bones do when the weather changes. I sit there until I can taste metal in my mouth, the taste I get when I'm about to do something I can't undo. On the top shelf of the pantry, behind a dented tin of pozole I keep for days my heart hurts, is a cigar box. The box used to hold the expensive ones I bought once a year to light on my wedding anniversary, one for me, one for Marisol, which she never smoked. I just wanted the smell, she'd say, and then she'd make me put it out because the kitchen was her kingdom and smoke is a kind of disrespect. The cigars are gone. The box holds papers. I bring it to the table like an offering. Inside are 5 years of bank statements and a memory I've been avoiding, folded into the shape of a man. Automatic transfers, $2,450 on the first of every month, labeled innocuously as Alvarez Living Trust Escrow. The thing about names is they can be both shield and spear. We set it up that way. Clara insisted on calling it a trust because it sounded sophisticated, but the money came from me. It left me so precisely it was like someone was measuring my pulse with a ruler. Next to that stack is a copy of the home inspection I paid for. The invoice for the down payment I fronted. Receipts for the temporary utility bills that lasted 18 months longer than temporary ever should. A handwritten note in Marisol's looping script on a blue sticky, Sergio, be kind, but don't be a fool. The year is smudged. Grease from some old dinner smeared it and left a crescent moon across the words. She was alive then. I was someone else. I take out the statements one by one, like laying out photographs of the same bad decision in different outfits. I find the phone number for the credit union and punch the buttons hard enough that my index finger aches. An automated voice greets me cheerfully and offers me Spanish and English. I pick Spanish first, then English, because tonight I belong to both and to neither. When a human answers, I clear my throat and hear the scratch of my own aging. Customer service, this is Janie. Hi, Janie, I say. This is Sergio Alvarez. I need to cancel an automatic transfer. Effective immediately. She is efficient. She is kind in the way people who talk to strangers all day learn to be kind. She reads back numbers and dates and the word escrow 3 times. Do you want to stop this permanently or pause it? Permanently, I say, and my voice doesn't shake. Done, she says. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I say. There is not. When I hang up, I expect relief to rush me like river water. It doesn't. Relief sits down across from me in the form of a quiet I haven't met before. It is attentive and it is patient. It has all night. I make coffee I don't need just to hold something hot. The smell licks the walls and wakes old mornings that used to have Marisol humming under them. I pour it into the chipped mug Nico painted for me in first grade, Sergio printed in wobbling green, and drink it black. I am suddenly very awake. My phone lights up on the table. Nico. The name expands and contracts with my heart. I let it ring. He leaves a voicemail I won't listen to yet because I know the sound of him crying and I am not ready to forgive him for it. The second call is Clara. I flip the phone face down and the room becomes a church. I sit in the pew and offer my silence to something I hope is listening. Later, when the coffee grows cold and the night gets its way, I take out the last paper in the cigar box, an old yellow envelope with a title that used to be nothing but hopeful words and signatures. I run my finger over a paragraph I circled in pencil the day we bought Nico the house. Back then I circled it because I thought I was preparing to be prudent. Tonight the circle looks like a halo. I read the sentence again, quietly, like a prayer I'm not ready to say out loud. In the event that the Alvarez Living Trust ceases to contribute to the mortgage, primary responsibility shall transfer solely to the named residents and guarantors. I tell myself it's only a clause. I tell myself it's paper, not a weapon. I tell myself a lot of things until the truth makes a small, clean space in my chest. It whispers, Sergio, you just stopped paying to be unwelcome. When sleep finally takes me, it takes me in the chair at the table, head tipped back, mouth open, the way old men sleep when they live alone. In the morning, my neck hurts and the house is bright with winter sun that looks kinder than it is. I make eggs I eat standing up and put the dishes straight into the dishwasher because I am trying to be a man who doesn't postpone the inevitable. Before I leave for the shop, I pause in front of Marisol's photo. I did it, I tell her. I pulled the plug. Her smile, fixed in the frame, looks like understanding. Or maybe I need it to. On my way out, I pass the ceramic dish and the keys and the cigar box, now a little lighter. I lock the door I paid for and step out into a day that's pretending to be ordinary. I already know the phone will ring. I already know Clara will use words like irresponsible and cruel and family. I already know Nico will gulp air between sentences like a swimmer who misjudged the distance to shore. I already know the Whitfields will arrive to a house that costs more to heat than common decency and that they will sit at Clara's quartz island and talk about opera and philanthropy and whether the poinsettias clash with the rug. What I don't know yet, not really, not in my bones, is that in a few days, a story will run in our city's favorite paper with my face under a headline I didn't earn, and that a clause in an old envelope will become a fuse, and that a dinner meant to be curated will turn into something else entirely. I don't know yet about the letter with a county seal that will arrive in March or about the thing Clara's father once did in a boardroom that he thought stayed secret. All I know is this: there is a way to be poor in spirit and rich in regret. I've been both. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel something else coming. It has the shape of consequence. The first real betrayal didn't come when Nico told me I wasn't invited to Christmas. That was just the part one could point to, the one with a date and a smell and a photograph in my mind. The first real betrayal was slower, more like rot under a floorboard. You don't notice it until your weight is already on it, and by then it's too late to shift your balance. It started 3 years ago, on a Tuesday that tasted like burnt coffee. Nico called mid-morning, which he rarely did because mornings are for meetings. I was on my second job of the day, retiling the upstairs bathroom for an old client on Canyon Road. The sun was streaming through the skylight in gold slices, and I remember thinking if Marisol were alive she'd have wanted a house like this, warm, open, smelling faintly of sage and soap. "Dad," Nico said, his voice tight like he'd been holding it in, "Clara's SUV is in the shop. Transmission's shot. We're looking at $7,000. We don't have it." "7?" I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. "Jesus, Nico. What happened to the emergency fund?" There was a pause long enough for me to hear the ticking of the client's wall clock. "We used it," he said. On what, he didn't say. I could guess, Clara's habit of buying everything in triplicate because it's just practical to have backups, or the kind of vacations you need hashtags for. He asked if I could float them the money, just until bonus season. I told myself it was for him, for my boy. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd have said yes even if Marisol hadn't been the one to teach me that family doesn't let family sink when they can throw a rope. But when I transferred the money that afternoon, Clara texted me 2 words I didn't expect: "Thanks, Sergio." No exclamation point. No, "we'll pay you back." Just a receipt of my usefulness. It was the same tone she used the time I fixed the hinge on their pantry door and she said, "Oh, good. Now the quinoa's safe." Over the years, the asks got bigger and the pauses before them got shorter. First it was temporary help with their utilities when Nico was between jobs. Then the down payment on the house, framed as an investment in the family's future. Then, the mortgage payments themselves, just for the first year while they get settled. 1 year turned into 5. 5 years turned into me shopping at discount grocery stores so their imported olives could live in a glass jar in a climate-controlled pantry. It wasn't that they couldn't have made it work without me, it was that they didn't want to. Because why would you learn to swim if someone is always there to keep your head above water? The night I realized I'd been demoted from father to financier, it was raining. Santa Fe doesn't get rain like that often, thick drops pounding the tin roof like someone was emptying pockets of nails on it. I was at their place for dinner. Clara had invited me with her usual precision. Come at 6:15. That way you're here for the charcuterie but not early enough to get in the way. We sat at that marble island I paid for, Clara talking about a fundraiser she was organizing for the symphony. Bryce and Lorraine were there too, sipping wine so dark it looked like guilt in a glass. Lorraine leaned toward Clara and said, "So glad we're all together. We really need to discuss the garden." Clara lit up like someone had paid her to. "Yes. The landscaper says we'll need to redo the irrigation. Sergio, could you?" She didn't finish the sentence, because she didn't have to. I was expected to nod. To say yes. To be part of their "we" only when "we" meant "you'll pay for it." I said yes, because the alternative, saying no, felt like stepping off a cliff without a harness. I still thought saying yes meant keeping my son. I didn't realize I'd already lost him, piece by piece, every time I agreed to be useful instead of honest. But the sharpest cut came last year, at a dinner for Nico's birthday. It was just the four of us at a high-end steakhouse where the menus don't have prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Halfway through the meal, Clara leaned across the table and, smiling sweetly, said, "Sergio, I just love how you don't mind being in the background. Some fathers can't handle that their sons have moved into a different, social tier." Nico chuckled nervously, and I laughed too, because what else do you do when you've been insulted in a tone sweet enough to pour on pancakes? But later, in the truck, I sat with my hands on the wheel long after the engine was off. I replayed her words until I could hear what they really were, not a compliment, but a warning. A reminder that my place in their lives was behind them, out of sight, holding up the scenery so they could be the show. Looking back, I see it clearly. Every favor was a brick in the wall between us. Every transfer was another layer of paint over the rot. And every time I swallowed the insult, the silence grew teeth. By the time Christmas came this year, I wasn't surprised they didn't want me at the table. I was just surprised they said it out loud. I didn't know it then, but the real reason they wanted me gone wasn't because I didn't fit with Clara's family. It was because they'd mistaken my patience for weakness. They thought I'd keep paying even without the carrot of family dinners dangled in front of me. They didn't realize I'd been keeping a kind of mental ledger, one that wasn't measured in dollars, but in dignity. And that ledger was about to balance in a way they wouldn't see coming. The week after that first conversation about Christmas, the air around me seemed to change. Not just the weather, though the wind in Santa Fe was sharp enough to slice the skin off your knuckles, but the way I carried myself. Every conversation, every interaction with Nico and Clara, came with a weight I could feel pressing down on my shoulders. It wasn't a single blow that deepened the wound. It was the steady, relentless tapping of the chisel. One small humiliation at a time, each one so minor, that if you complained, you'd look paranoid. But when you stacked them together, they built a staircase straight to contempt. 2 days after the Christmas snub, Clara called. Not to apologize. Not even to explain. She wanted to know if I could pop by the house to meet the cable guy because she and Nico had an important brunch. Her voice was cheerful, like we hadn't spoken in years, and this was her way of reconnecting. I could hear Nico in the background, laughing with someone, probably Bryce. The sound hit me like a pebble in the shoe, irritating and impossible to ignore. "You want me to sit in your house all morning so the cable guy can run fiber optic for your movie nights?" I asked. "Well," she said lightly, "you do watch a lot of TV. I figured you'd be the perfect person to make sure it's all set up." I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched long enough for her to fill it with. "Besides, you have the spare key. Saves us the trouble. Not our house. Not my convenience. Just the ease of using me like a tool that's already lying on the workbench." Later that week, I stopped by their place to drop off a set of tools Nico had borrowed months ago and forgotten to return. The door was open, music spilling out, a jazz playlist that I knew for a fact Nico didn't listen to before he met Clara. Bryce was in the living room, sprawled on the leather couch I bought, sipping from a crystal glass. He didn't stand when he saw me. "Well, if it isn't the benefactor," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The words caught me off guard. "Excuse me?" "Oh, come on," he said, gesturing to the house around him. "It's practically stamped with your name. Sergio's generosity, floors, walls, roof. Quite the legacy you're building here, even if it's not in your name." I could feel the heat rise in my face. Nico walked in just then, arms full of grocery bags, and Bryce smirked. "You've raised a smart one. Knows how to leverage his resources." Nico didn't correct him. Didn't say a word. Just set the bags on the counter and asked if I could help carry in the rest from the car. Another blow came at a fundraising dinner for the Arts Foundation where Clara insisted Nico bring me 4 optics. I realized what she meant when they sat me at the far end of the table, between 2 people who barely spoke to me, while Nico and Clara laughed and toasted with Bryce and Lorraine in the center. Halfway through, a woman I didn't know leaned over and said, "Clara tells me you're retired now. Must be nice to just putter around while the kids handle the real responsibilities." It was a small cut. A throwaway comment. But it came from somewhere, and I knew exactly where. Each of these moments was a paper cut across an old scar. By themselves, they'd sting and fade. Together, they bled into something darker. At night, I'd sit at my kitchen table with the bank statements and try to convince myself I was imagining the disrespect. But the numbers didn't lie. Every month was another offering to the gods of their comfort. And those gods didn't even send a thank you note. The final humiliation before I broke came the Sunday before Christmas. I stopped by unannounced to drop off a bottle of wine for Nico, a 20-year-old Tempranillo I'd been saving for a special occasion. Through the open blinds, I saw them all gathered in the living room. The tree lit, stockings hung, Clara in the center like a conductor leading an orchestra. I knocked. The music paused. Clara opened the door just enough to block the view inside. "Oh. Sergio. We're in the middle of a little pre-Christmas brunch. Just family." Her eyes flicked over my jacket, my hands holding the bottle, and she smiled the kind of smile you give a stranger who's taken the wrong seat at a restaurant. "You understand," she said. I did. I understood perfectly. And I understood something else too, something that would keep me awake that night and the next. They had mistaken my silence for permission. They had mistaken my patience for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with the quiet click of a lock. It was the Monday before Christmas. I had just gotten home from a long day at the shop, my hands smelling faintly of sawdust and metal, the kind of smell that always made me think of my father's garage. The sun was already gone, swallowed early by winter, and the kitchen felt too big for one man's footsteps. The phone was buzzing on the counter. Nico's name glowed on the screen. I almost didn't pick up, our calls lately had been more obligation than conversation, but something in me still wanted to believe there might be an olive branch before Christmas. "Hey, Dad," he said. His voice was tight, not with anger, but with something worse, distance. "Clara asked me to let you know, her parents are coming in early on Friday, and we'll be busy the whole weekend getting the house ready. So, maybe we can see you sometime after the holidays?" The fork in my hand stopped halfway to the plate. "After the holidays," I repeated. Like it was a dentist appointment. "It's just," he started, but I cut him off. "Just what? That your wife's parents don't want me around? That I'm not fit for their version of a family?" Silence. I could hear him breathing. The same pause he used to take as a kid when he'd been caught lying. "They have their traditions, Dad. It's not personal." "Not personal?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Nico, I paid for that house. I kept the lights on. I covered the mortgage when you were unemployed. Tell me what's personal if that isn't. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been bracing for this. Look, maybe you should take a step back. It's just easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. There it was. My son had just told me that my absence was a convenience. I didn't remember setting the fork down. I didn't remember standing up. I just knew that by the time I walked to the den, my hands were steady, my mind clear in a way it hadn't been in years. In the top drawer of my desk was a manila folder. Inside, 5 years of proof that I had been the backbone of their life while they treated me like an accessory they could store away in a closet. Mortgage payment receipts. The $46,800 down payment I'd pulled from my home equity. Thousands in utilities, repairs, upgrades. The granite countertops Clara bragged about to her friends. Every page smelled faintly of ink and time. Every page was a confession they'd never meant to make. I laid them out on the desk, one after another, until the surface was covered in my own handwriting and their good fortune. It didn't look like generosity anymore, it looked like evidence. That night, I sat in the dark with only the glow of the desk lamp. I thought about Marisol's voice the night before we signed the first check for Nico's down payment. Be kind, Sergio, but don't be a fool. I'd been both. The trust was gone. Not just in Nico, but in myself, for letting it get this far. And that's when something shifted in me. The grief of being excluded, the humiliation of being treated like an ATM, it hardened into something sharper. They had taken my money, my dignity, my place at the table. But they had underestimated one thing. I knew every brick in the house they lived in. And I knew exactly how to pull them out, one by one, until the whole thing collapsed. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. I could almost hear Clara's voice, dripping with that refined condescension. We're curating a certain guest experience. Fine. I'd curate my own. One with an ending they wouldn't see coming. The decision didn't feel like a flare of rage. It felt inevitable. Like a tide turning. Like a door closing that had been left open far too long. The days after that call were the quietest of my life. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, more like the dead air after a power outage, when the hum of the refrigerator stops and you realize how much you depended on the noise. I stopped answering the phone. Stopped going by the shop except for the jobs I couldn't push off without losing a client. Even Rosa noticed when I skipped Sunday dinner, something I hadn't done since Marisol's funeral. You sick? She asked in her voicemail. I didn't call back. I wasn't sick. I was just gone. The house felt bigger without Marisol's voice in it, and emptier still without the illusion that I had a family who wanted me in theirs. I'd sit at the kitchen table long after the coffee went cold, staring at the stack of bank statements like they were gravestones. Each page was a year of my life I wasn't getting back. Each number a reminder that I'd traded time, my only real currency, for their comfort. When the silence got too heavy, I'd put on the old ranchera records Marisol used to play on Saturday mornings. But instead of lifting me, they pressed me deeper into the chair, into the ache in my chest that didn't seem to have a bottom. Christmas Eve came and went without a word from Nico. I didn't check social media, but I didn't have to. I knew there would be photos of them around that 12-foot tree, Bryce and Lorraine in the center, Clara glowing for the camera. Maybe a post about family and gratitude. Maybe even one of those quotes people post to pretend they're humble. It's not about what's under the tree, it's about who's around it. I knew who wasn't around it. The first week of January was worse. Everyone else was returning to work, returning to life. I was pacing the living room at odd hours, flipping through channels I didn't watch, opening the fridge to stare at food I didn't want. It wasn't just loneliness, it was something heavier. Like I'd been erased. Like I'd been in a play for years, delivering my lines faithfully, only to show up one night and find my part cut from the script. One night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. No reason. Just sat up in bed, heart pounding like I'd heard something. I padded into the kitchen for water, and that's when I saw it. A piece of mail sticking halfway out from under the front door, bent and wet from the snow that had drifted against the porch. It wasn't a bill. Not a Christmas card either. It was an envelope from a law firm downtown, the one I knew handled Bryce and Lorraine's affairs. My name was handwritten in the corner, no return address, no stamp. Someone had brought it here themselves. I stood in the kitchen holding it, feeling the paper soften in my hand from the melted snow. For a long minute, I just stared at it, the way you look at something that might change everything. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter, poured my water, and leaned against the sink. The cold from the glass seeped into my palm. The hum of the refrigerator came back into focus. That envelope was a key. To what, I didn't know yet. But I knew this much: the people who had shut me out of their lives didn't leave notes on my doorstep unless they'd made a mistake. And mistakes, when you're patient enough, can be turned into weapons. I didn't touch the envelope again until morning. Not because I forgot about it, hell, I didn't sleep after finding it, but because I wanted a clear head before I opened it. Years of running my own business had taught me one thing: timing can be as important as truth. When the sun finally rose over the Sangre de Cristos, the kitchen was bright enough to make the snow outside look like it had been poured from a bag of sugar. I sat down at the table with a mug of coffee and placed the envelope in front of me like it was a live wire. It wasn't sealed with glue, just tucked shut. That alone told me something: it wasn't meant to go through the mail. Whoever had dropped it off wanted it to get to me quickly, and without leaving an official trail. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a folded set of documents. Thick paper, embossed letterhead, Whitfield and Langford, attorneys at law. Bryce and Lorraine's legal pit bulls. The first page was a standard-looking contract. But the names in the header made my stomach go still. Mortgage Assumption Agreement, Alvarez Living Trust / Nico Alvarez and Clara Whitfield Alvarez. I knew the trust name: it was the account I'd been funneling money through for 5 years. But this document was different. It was a modification dated just 3 months ago, without my signature anywhere. Page 2 was worse. It was a notarized addendum stating that, in the event of default, the property could be transferred to interested parties, without public listing. Those interested parties? Bryce and Lorraine Whitfield. My coffee went cold while I read it twice more. The picture began to form. If I kept paying, the house stayed in Nico and Clara's name, safe and secure. If I stopped, and they defaulted, the Whitfields would swoop in and take it: no foreclosure auction, no chance for anyone else to buy it. I sat back in the chair, the wood creaking under my weight. For 5 years, I'd thought I was keeping my son and his wife afloat. Turns out, I'd been fattening a pig for someone else's feast. The third page was a memo, short, 2 paragraphs, no signature. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. Clara's. It wasn't addressed to me. It was to Bryce. Dad. Sergio's starting to pull back. He's being moody and asking too many questions. Nico's trying to calm him down, but worst case scenario, if he cuts the payments, we can fast-track the transfer. You and Mom can hold it until we refinance under our own terms. Don't worry, I'll handle him. The words didn't make me angry at first. They made me cold. Like someone had drained the heat right out of my body. Handle him. Like I was a squeaky hinge on a door she didn't want to replace. The Whitfields hadn't just been tolerating me for the sake of appearances, they'd been planning for my usefulness to end. Planning for my removal. I picked up the envelope again and turned it over. No stamp, no return address. But there was a faint smudge of ink in the corner. Someone had tried to scratch out a name. Under the scratch, I could make out the letters, Pat, before it disappeared into the tear. Patricia. The name clicked in my mind. Patricia Morrison, the lifestyle editor at the Santa Fe Chronicle. The same one who'd run that flattering puff piece on the Whitfield's philanthropy last year. The same woman Clara had gushed about knowing personally. But why would she slip this to me? I didn't know the answer yet. But I knew this. If Patricia Morrison had turned on the Whitfields enough to pass me something this dangerous, it meant cracks were already forming in their perfect little social wall. And cracks, when widened just right, can bring down an entire facade. I slid the papers back into the envelope, but not before making copies on the dusty printer in my office. One set went back in the cigar box. The other went into a folder labeled, in my neat block letters, ammunition. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to alive. I had proof. Not just of their greed, but of their intent. The isolation I'd been drowning in shifted into focus. I wasn't cut off. I wasn't powerless. I was on the outside looking in, and I could see exactly where to aim. I didn't open the folder again until the following afternoon. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find, I already knew it was poison, but because I wanted to approach it like a craftsman, not a demolition man. Rage demolishes everything. Precision takes down only what needs to fall. The envelope had already given me one truth. The Whitfields weren't just passive beneficiaries of my generosity, they were plotting to own that house outright if I so much as blinked. But I had a feeling this was only the surface layer. And I've been in construction long enough to know that if the surface is rotting, the foundation's worse. First step, I started with the name, Patricia Morrison. If she had slipped those papers to me, she was either A, looking to cover her own tracks, B, gunning for the Whitfields, or C, using me for her own game. Any of the three could be useful, if I understood her angle. A quick search on my laptop pulled up her Santa Fe Chronicle author page, puff pieces on socialites, charity events, restaurant openings. Nothing to suggest she'd be a whistleblower. But I noticed something, a string of recent articles about ethics in philanthropy. All written in the last 6 months. All subtly critical of the people she was writing about. I clicked on one from September, about a mismanaged art endowment, tied to the same arts foundation Clara sat on. The article didn't name names, but one photo in the spread was unmistakable, Clara, front row at the gala, Bryce standing beside her, both of them holding champagne flutes like they'd invented the stuff. If Patricia was willing to poke at them in print, maybe the leak wasn't an accident. Maybe she had something to settle. I kept digging. Public records, archived news articles, anything with Whitfield and property in the same sentence. That's when I found it. A 5-year-old lawsuit, settled quietly, accusing Bryce of defrauding a business partner in a land deal north of Santa Fe. The partner had been forced to sell under financial duress, only for the land to be flipped 6 months later for triple the price. The plaintiff? A man named Miguel Ortega. And the attorney who represented him? None other than Whitfield and Langford, the same firm on my mortgage documents. It didn't take a genius to see the play. Bryce uses his network to pressure people into defaults, then sweeps in to scoop up the assets. The same exact structure he and Clara were positioning around Nico's house. That alone was bad enough. But then I saw the kicker, Miguel Ortega had been Patricia Morrison's cousin. Now it all made sense. Patricia hadn't just slipped me that envelope out of journalistic ethics. This was personal. She couldn't take Bryce down directly, too risky for her career, but she could feed the right piece of bait to someone with a score to settle. Someone like me. I printed everything I'd found, court filings, settlement notices, Patricia's articles, and laid them out on the kitchen table next to the mortgage papers. The whole picture was coming into focus. 1. Bryce and Lorraine had designed a backdoor in Nico's mortgage so they could own the property if I pulled out. 2. Clara had been actively preparing for that moment, confident she could handle me. 3. Bryce's history showed a pattern of forcing people into financial corners, then taking what they'd built. 4. Patricia had a vendetta, and she'd chosen me as her proxy. I sat back in my chair and stared at the pile. A month ago, I'd been excluded from Christmas dinner. Now I was holding the kind of leverage that could burn their whole social circle to the ground. The only question was how to use it without singeing myself in the process. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and stood in front of Marisol's photo on the mantel. "I found it, Mari," I said softly. "The thing they didn't want me to see." Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to say what I was already thinking. Finding the truth was only the first step. What came next had to be deliberate. And it had to hurt. When you've been wronged, the urge is to sprint straight to the part where you slam the hammer down. But in my world, construction or revenge, if you start swinging without checking the load-bearing walls, you're just as likely to bring the whole thing down on your own head. The more I studied those documents, the more I realized that the truth, on its own, wouldn't save me. It could even ruin me if I played it wrong. First problem, the Whitfield's connections. Bryce didn't just know people, he owned them in the ways that matter. Bank executives, lawyers, country club board members, donors to every gala in Santa Fe. If I made a public accusation without airtight proof and the perfect timing, they'd spin it faster than I could open my mouth. They'd turn me into the bitter old man who misunderstood a routine legal arrangement. The Chronicle would run some polite hit piece about my declining mental state. Neighbors I'd known for decades would look away in the grocery store aisle. Second problem, Nico. As much as I hated what he'd become, part of me still wanted to believe there was a road back for him. If I went scorched earth too soon, he'd see me as the enemy, not the people pulling his strings. That meant I had to craft something surgical, a way to cut out Bryce and Clara's hold without shattering whatever was left between me and my son. Third, and maybe biggest, problem, the law itself. Technically, there was nothing illegal about the mortgage assumption agreement. Predatory? Yes. Immoral? Absolutely. But on paper, it was clean. If I accused them outright, they could claim it was just estate planning. That meant my revenge couldn't just be about proving they had a plan to take the house. I needed to show the pattern, the Ortega deal, the quiet settlements, the financial manipulation that lived in the shadows behind their philanthropy smiles. And I had to connect it all in a way that would make even their friends see them as radioactive. That's when the other danger hit me, Patricia Morrison. She'd given me enough to hang Bryce, but she hadn't done it out of kindness. If she was willing to hand over something this explosive, it was because she wanted me to light the match. And if I burned them, she'd be right there with her notepad and camera, writing the story she couldn't write herself. If that happened before I was ready, the Whitfields would have a head start on their counterattack. I needed Patricia, but I couldn't let her control the tempo. So I made rules for myself, written in the same block letters I used for job site instructions. 1. No public moves without 3 layers of proof. 2. Never let them know which card I'm playing next. 3. Keep Nico in the dark until the final act. 4. Patricia gets nothing until I decide it's time. For the next 2 days, I barely left the house. I turned my office into a war room. Court filings taped to the wall, sticky notes mapping Bryce's network, photographs of Ortega's land taken from old property listings. On the desk, the mortgage agreement sat in a plastic sleeve, my fingerprints already replaced by latex smudges from the gloves I wore to handle it. The more I studied the map, the more I saw it. Bryce's empire wasn't a castle, it was scaffolding. Impressive from the outside, but hollow inside. One bolt in the right place, loosened at the right time, and the whole thing would fold. But loosening that bolt would put me in the line of fire. Bryce wouldn't just try to discredit me, he'd go for my business, my savings, my name. And Clara, she'd smile while she helped him do it. I'd spent 5 years letting them take from me without a fight. If I was going to hit back now, I had to accept that there'd be no going back to normal. The man they thought they could handle would have to disappear. From here on out, every move had to be deliberate. Every risk calculated. And every step forward had to lead to the night I'd make them choke on the version of family they tried to sell me. The first phase wasn't about striking. It was about softening the ground, making sure that by the time I planted the charges, the walls around the Whitfields were already starting to lean. People like Bryce and Clara don't lose everything in one big explosion. They lose it in whispers, in moments where their friends start to look at them sideways. Social currency evaporates faster than cash. And in a place like Santa Fe, reputation is the only real tender. Step 1: Invisible Seeds. I started with the holiday thank you cards. Every year since I helped them buy the house, Clara sent out embossed notes, from our family, to everyone in their orbit, neighbors, fellow donors, the gallery crowd. This year, I sent my own. A simple cream card with my name on the front in modest black lettering. Inside, the message was handwritten in my cleanest penmanship. Wishing you a happy new year. Grateful for your friendship during a year when I learned the true value of family, and how sometimes, the people you've helped the most aren't the ones who stand beside you in the end. No accusations. No names. Just a seed. And because Santa Fe's high society crowd thrives on half-heard stories, I knew it would take root. Step 2: Reappearing in the right places. For years, I'd been invisible at events unless Clara wanted a supporting character in her curated evenings. Now, I showed up where she didn't expect me: charity luncheons, gallery openings, the kinds of places where the Whitfields thought they controlled the narrative. I didn't approach them. Didn't cause a scene. I simply stood in conversations with people they knew, laughing easily, looking like a man who had nothing to hide. When people asked how my holidays were, I'd smile and say, quiet. I wasn't with the kids this year, but that's a long story. Then I'd excuse myself. The curiosity did the rest. Step 3: The Ortega thread. From the war room in my office, I pulled the first strand from Bryce's past, the Miguel Ortega case. I didn't take it to Patricia, that would be too obvious. Instead, I mentioned it over coffee with Luis, an old subcontractor who now worked maintenance at one of the Whitfields' favorite country clubs. I told it like a half-forgotten anecdote. How's that Ortega place up north? Shame about how he lost it. You remember who bought it, right? Luis's eyebrows rose. He didn't need me to say more. In this town, people fill in the blanks faster than you can hand them a pen. Step 4: Watching the ripples. It didn't take long. 2 weeks into January, Bryce's smile at public events had changed. It was tighter, like he was aware of an audience he couldn't quite read. Clara had started overcompensating, leaning harder into her hostess role, posting more on social media about their perfect life. And Nico called one evening out of the blue. Not to apologize, not yet, but to check in. His voice had that edge of someone testing the water before they dive. How have you been, Dad? He asked. Better, I said simply. Distance can be healthy. I could almost hear him turning that over in his head. Phase 1 wasn't glamorous. It was slow, methodical, almost boring at times. But it was necessary. By the time I moved to Phase 2, the cracks in the Whitfields' image wouldn't just be there, they'd be widening on their own. Phase 1 had been about whispers and shadows. Phase 2 would be about pressure. Not enough to make them lash out in a way that exposed me, but enough to make their foundation groan under the weight. If the first part of my plan was like softening a piece of hardwood before working it, the second part was testing for weak points and tapping them just hard enough to splinter. Step 1: The country club lever. The Whitfield social throne wasn't their house. It was the Santa Fe Canyon Club. Bryce held court there like a minor king, afternoon scotch in hand, a rotation of business friends coming to kiss the ring. That throne had a weak leg: dues. Country clubs don't like late payments, they like members who are flush and reliable. I knew from the Ortega case files, and from quiet words dropped by Luis the maintenance guy, that Bryce liked to delay big checks until he'd moved money around for his projects. One evening, I ran into an old acquaintance, Denise Vargas, who happened to sit on the Canyon Club's finance committee. Over coffee, I casually asked if the club had been hit by the recent wave of delinquent payments among its members. She leaned in. "You'd be surprised. Even some of our bigger names." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. 2 days later, I knew Denise had connected the dots. Her circle always did. Step 2. Drying up the easy money. Clara's pet projects, the Arts Foundation, the charity gala circuit, were expensive hobbies disguised as philanthropy. They didn't just run on donations, they ran on visibility. No wealthy donor likes to feel their name might be tainted by association. Through a few well-placed conversations with minor but talkative donors, I made sure certain words entered the gossip bloodstream: financial games, questionable deals, backdoor clauses. Nothing concrete, nothing traceable to me, just enough to make a couple of potential sponsors reconsider for the upcoming gala. When I checked the foundation's event page a week later, I noticed the presenting sponsor line was marked TBA. Step 3. The mortgage clock. The real weight I could bring down was the house itself. I'd already stopped my payments. From the documents Patricia had slipped me, I knew the Whitfields' plan was to let Nico and Clara default, then swoop in to assume ownership quietly. But what if the clock on that default sped up? A quiet call to an old friend at the bank, someone who'd owed me since I'd saved their home from foreclosure back in 2010, was all it took to review the terms on the Alvarez mortgage. No illegal moves. Just adjustments in how quickly the missed payments would trigger a notice of default. I didn't need to break their plan yet. I just needed to make it start ticking loud enough for Clara to hear it in her sleep. Step 4. Letting the pressure show. By early February, I started to see it. At a Chamber of Commerce mixer, Bryce's handshake had the dampness of a man thinking about too many things at once. Clara's Instagram, usually a curated feed of luxury, was full of throwbacks instead of fresh content, a sure sign she was trying to keep up appearances without spending too much. And Nico. Nico looked tired. When I passed him in the plaza one morning, he stopped me, to ask how I'd been. It was small talk, sure, but it was the first time in years I saw something like the old boy in his eyes. He almost asked me something else, I could tell. But Clara appeared at his side, sunglasses on, smile just sharp enough to cut the moment short. Phase 2 wasn't about winning yet. It was about starving the fire, cutting off the easy air they breathed, forcing them to fight smaller and smaller battles while I stayed in the shadows. The next step? Pull the trigger on Phase 3, execution. Not all at once, but enough to make them realize that the man they'd handled had been building something they couldn't stop. Phase 3 wasn't about hints anymore. It was about the first swing, loud enough that everyone in their circle heard the crack, but clean enough that they couldn't trace the hammer back to me. Step 1, the perfect stage. The Whitfields were scheduled to host the Arts Foundation's quarterly donor reception. Normally, it was a low-key affair, wine, speeches, networking, but this time Clara had announced it would be a showcase of the family's commitment to the arts community. Translation, a photo op. I knew they'd be inviting the press. I also knew Patricia Morrison would be there, because the Santa Fe Chronicle always covered these events. That meant the stage was set for a little choreography. Step 2, the accidental leak. 2 days before the event, I sent an anonymous package to 3 of the smaller, gossip-hungry society blogs in Santa Fe. Inside. The front page of Miguel Ortega's old lawsuit against Bryce, with the settlement line highlighted. A printout of the mortgage addendum with the Whitfields' names circled. One of Clara's own social media posts bragging about protecting our legacy property. No commentary. No explanation. Just enough to make anyone with a taste for scandal connect the dots. Step 3, watching the spark. By the time the reception rolled around, the blogs had done exactly what I knew they would, posted questions about Bryce's business practices and interesting real estate clauses tied to the family. They didn't make outright accusations, they didn't have to. The readers did it in the comments for them. When I arrived, dressed in my best charcoal suit, not invited but not forbidden, I could feel it in the air. Whispers in the corners. People looking over shoulders before leaning in. A subtle widening of space around the hosts, like someone had spilled something sticky on the floor and no one wanted to step in it. Step 4, the public cut. During the reception, Bryce stepped up to the mic to give his donor speech. It was the usual script: gratitude, community, investing in our shared future. I was standing near the back when a voice from the left side of the room called out, "Bryce, how many properties have you invested in this way?" The crowd turned. It wasn't me. It was an older gentleman in a navy blazer, one of the longtime donors. I recognized him. He was holding a printout of the very lawsuit I'd sent. Bryce's face froze for half a second before he smiled and brushed it off as complicated business matters. But I saw it, just a flicker, the moment he realized this wasn't a stray rumor. This was coordinated. Step 5, the photo. While Bryce stumbled through his recovery, I made my way toward the patio where Patricia was taking candid shots of the guests. I didn't speak to her. I just made sure to walk past, pause at the railing, and glance toward the camera with the faintest smile. By the next morning, the Chronicle's online gallery included a shot of me in that pose, with the caption, "Sergio Alvarez, longtime supporter of the Santa Fe arts community, attends Thursday's reception." No connection to the Whispers. No direct mention of the Whitfields. But in the comments, the readers were already making the link between the man who helped his son buy a house and those real estate rumors. Phase 3's first strike had landed. Small enough to look like coincidence, big enough to make Bryce and Clara feel the ground shift. Now, they'd be scrambling to plug holes in their image. And that's when I'd hit them again, harder. I knew they wouldn't take the first hit lying down. Bryce and Clara weren't built for humility, they were built for retaliation, dressed up as setting the record straight. The only question was how fast they'd move. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long. Step 1, the article. 3 days after the donor reception, the Santa Fe Chronicle dropped a "Profile in Philanthropy" piece on the Whitfields. Front page of the lifestyle section. Full-color spread of Bryce and Clara in their garden, arms around each other, Clara holding a glass of white wine like she was born with it. The headline was syrupy sweet. Bryce and Clara Whitfield, building legacy through generosity. Half the article was fluff about their charitable giving, but the other half was targeted. Little lines slipped in about rumors from disgruntled acquaintances, and misunderstandings about property transfers common in estate planning. There was even a quote, Clara's voice so obviously rehearsed it might as well have been italicized. "When you've been blessed, people will try to tear you down. We choose to rise above, to keep giving, and to trust that the truth speaks for itself." No names. But anyone in their world knew exactly who she was talking about. Step 2, the phone call. That afternoon, Nico called. Not the hesitant check-ins from the past few weeks, this was direct, clipped. "Dad," he said, "what are you doing?" "Living my life," I replied. He sighed. "You've been talking to people. Planting stories." "Have I?" I kept my voice even. "Or are people just seeing what's been in front of them all along?" "You're going to make this worse," he said. "Clara's parents." "Clara's parents," I cut in, "have been planning for me to stop paying your mortgage so they can take the house. Tell me again how I'm the one making things worse." Silence. Then the line went dead. Step 3, turning the knife. I knew the profile piece was Bryce and Clara's way of trying to close ranks, to make me look like the bitter outsider. But the thing about publicly declaring your virtue is that it gives people something to measure you against. And if you don't measure up, the fall is faster. The morning after the article ran, I sent a manila envelope, no return address, to the Chronicle's business editor. Inside, a copy of Miguel Ortega's lawsuit. A screenshot of the mortgage addendum with the Whitfields' names highlighted. A typed note: if you want a story about legacy, you might want to see how it's built. The business desk wasn't the lifestyle section. They didn't care about garden photos. They cared about numbers, deals, and patterns. Step 4: Watching the lines cross. A week later, the Chronicle published a brief piece on page B4, not flashy, but damaging in its own way. It was about local real estate strategies that skirted ethical lines. No names, but the examples were clearly drawn from Bryce's playbook. The story quoted a source familiar with the transactions, saying such practices were legally permissible but corrosive to trust in the market. Bryce's name wasn't in print. It didn't have to be. Anyone who'd read the puff piece the week before could connect the dots. They'd tried to paint me as bitter. I'd painted them as untrustworthy, without ever saying the word out loud. And they were starting to feel it. At the next gallery opening, I saw Clara scanning the room, her smile too wide, her eyes flicking toward little pockets of whispered conversation. Bryce's laugh was half a beat late every time. The counterattack had failed. But they weren't done yet. I could feel it. Which meant it was time to bring the first major twist into play. By mid-February, I thought I had them exactly where I wanted them, scrambling to patch holes in their reputation, unsure where the leaks were coming from, and too busy managing appearances to plan any real counterstrike. I'd underestimated them. Step 1: The letter. It came on a Wednesday, in a heavy white envelope embossed with the logo of a law firm I didn't recognize. Not Whitfield and Langford, this was a different animal: Harrison, Crow and Fielding, a national outfit with branches in 6 states. Inside was a formal letter, addressed to me by name, accusing me of defamation, tortious interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The language was cold and surgical. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Bryce Whitfield and Mr. and Mrs. Nicholas Alvarez, have been made aware of statements you have allegedly made to members of the public, local media representatives, and potential business associates that are false, misleading, and intended to harm their personal and professional reputation. It demanded I cease and desist from making any further statements and threatened a civil suit if I didn't comply. The kicker? They'd attached a list of examples, half-truths twisted into outright lies, with no way to prove I hadn't said them unless I recorded every conversation I'd had for the past month. Step 2: The real threat. A lawsuit on its own didn't scare me, I knew how much of it was bluff. What chilled me was the last page, an exhibit with the Santa Fe Chronicle watermark. It was an internal email, forwarded from someone at the paper to Bryce, mentioning a source who had been feeding information about his past deals. And the description of the source? It matched me almost word for word. They'd gotten to Patricia. Or at least, they'd gotten into her inbox. Step 3: The gut punch. That night, I called Patricia from the number I'd been keeping in my back pocket since she dropped the mortgage documents at my door. She answered on the second ring. "Sergio," she said, her voice low. "You shouldn't be calling me on this line." "What the hell did you give them?" I asked. "Nothing they couldn't find on their own," she replied. "But they know someone's been helping you, and they've guessed it's me. I have to protect my job." "You started this," I said. "You handed me the match." "I know," she said. "But I didn't think you'd move this fast." Her tone wasn't guilt, it was fear. And if Patricia Morrison was afraid, it meant the Whitfields weren't just threatening me. They were threatening anyone who stood near me. Step 4: Realizing the shift. This was the moment I understood. I wasn't the only one playing chess anymore. They'd stopped reacting. They'd started hunting. The cease and desist letter wasn't just a warning, it was bait. If I answered publicly, if I got defensive, I'd be playing on their board. They'd paint me as a vindictive old man trying to settle a personal score, and every bit of truth I had would look like spite. They were forcing me into silence without ever stepping into a courtroom. Step 5, the choice. For 2 days, I stayed quiet. Didn't talk to anyone who might carry words back to them. Didn't answer Nico's texts. I went to the shop, came home, and sat in my war room, staring at the map I'd built of their network. And then I saw it, the one connection I'd overlooked. Someone who could break their control of the story without my fingerprints anywhere near it. Someone they couldn't intimidate without setting themselves on fire. It meant changing my plan. It meant accelerating the timeline for the final strike. It meant risking every ounce of leverage I'd built. But after that letter, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to win this by outlasting them. I was going to win by ending it. I'd always imagined the endgame happening in their house, maybe at some holiday table like the one they'd barred me from. But the Whitfield cease and desist had changed the terrain. They wanted me silent? Fine. I'd speak in a place where my voice wouldn't be just heard, it would be recorded, printed, and repeated by people who couldn't be silenced. Step 1, the stage. The Santa Fe Business Leaders Association was hosting its annual spring luncheon, a networking event for the kind of people Bryce liked to be seen with. It wasn't just a social thing, it was a stage where reputations were made or broken. The kind of stage you can't walk off without showing the whole room you're rattled. Bryce was on the program as the keynote speaker, billed as a visionary investor committed to community growth. Clara would be there too, her name was in the brochure as a co-sponsor through the Arts Foundation. And me? Thanks to an old friend on the event committee, I had a seat at table 4, front and center. Step 2, the trap. The plan wasn't to accuse them outright. That would give them control. The plan was to make the room accuse them. I spent the week before the luncheon preparing packets. Not the whole war chest, just enough to make the Whitfield's legacy look like something you wouldn't want your own name tied to. Each packet contained a copy of the Ortega lawsuit's opening complaint, the mortgage addendum with their names on it, a bulleted timeline of similar transactions pulled from public records, no commentary, just dates, properties, and sale prices. At the bottom, in plain print. Sources: Santa Fe County Property Records, New Mexico Court Archives. I slipped one packet into each of 10 envelopes and gave them to a handful of people I trusted to accidentally leave them on tables and chairs before the keynote. Step 3, the hit. The luncheon hall was full, the air warm with the smell of roasted chicken and ambition. When Bryce took the stage, he had the easy smile of a man who believed he'd weathered the storm. He opened with a joke, got polite laughter, and launched into his speech about building opportunities. I waited. Halfway through, I saw it happen. A man at table 7 opened one of the packets, frowned, and passed it to the woman next to him. She whispered to another guest. 2 tables over, someone else unfolded the same papers. Heads turned. Eyes shifted from the stage to the pages in their hands. Bryce faltered, just for a beat, then tried to push through. But the room's attention was moving without him now, and he could feel it. Every time he said, integrity, or trust, I could see a muscle jump in his jaw. Step 4, the question. When he finished, the moderator opened the floor for questions. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't even have to raise my hand. From the back of the room, a voice called out. Mr. Whitfield, could you speak to your role in the Ortega land deal? And how it compares to the Alvarez mortgage arrangement? The silence that followed was electric. Every head in the room turned toward Bryce. Clara's face went pale, her smile frozen like porcelain about to crack. Bryce cleared his throat. I'm not sure where you're getting Santa Fe County Records, the voice shot back. It's all right here. And just like that, the room wasn't Bryce's anymore. It belonged to the question. Step 5, the walk. Bryce stumbled through a non-answer about complex transactions and misunderstandings, but the damage was done. By the time he stepped down, the buzz in the room had shifted from polite applause to low, sharp whispers. I didn't have to say a word. I just stood as he passed my table, met his eyes, and gave him the same faint smile I'd given Patricia's camera weeks earlier. For the first time since this started, he looked at me like he knew exactly who had dismantled his stage. They wanted me quiet. Instead, I'd made sure the right people were talking. And talking was something they couldn't stop. When the luncheon ended, I didn't follow Bryce and Clara out. I stayed seated, letting the tide of conversation sweep past me, business cards exchanged, half-finished desserts abandoned, the clink of silverware against porcelain fading into the hush of people leaning in to whisper. Whispering about them. It was over in one sense. The stage was gone, their polished image now dented with words like fraud, predatory, Ortega, and Alvarez. But the truth about revenge is, it doesn't feel like fireworks. It's quieter. Heavier. Like the air after a storm, you can breathe again, but you still smell the rain. The aftermath. By the following week, 2 local papers had run special reports on the Whitfield dealings. No one mentioned my name, thank God, but the dots were there for anyone to connect if they looked hard enough. Clara's Arts Foundation quietly withdrew from the upcoming Santa Fe Gala for personal reasons. Bryce was taking a step back from public engagements. In plain English, they'd been benched. Nico heard about it before I could decide whether to tell him. He called me late on a Thursday night, his voice trembling, not from fear, but from something closer to relief. I don't know what you did, he said, but, thank you. You didn't just defend me. You defended everyone who didn't have the chance to fight back. I swallowed hard. There it was, that part of revenge no one talks about. It's not just about settling scores. Sometimes, it's about building a wall so no one else gets hit. The confrontation that never happened. I thought they might confront me, show up at my door, send another letter, something. But they didn't. Instead, I got a simple, impersonal envelope in the mail from a law office I recognized. Inside was a single sentence, typed in a clean serif font. This matter is considered closed. No signature. No threats. No apology. I laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed the truth. When people like the Whitfields can't win, they vanish. Their silence is the only surrender they'll ever give you. The choice. Revenge stories usually end with the hero walking away, or standing on some metaphorical cliff, staring at the horizon. But mine ends in a place smaller, and maybe more important, my kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee in the air. A notepad on the table with sketches for a new venture, a community property co-op. Nico's name in the margin, underlined twice. I could have left Santa Fe. I could have moved somewhere far enough that the Whitfield name would just be a rumor. But leaving would have meant they took more than they already had. So I stayed. And every time I pass one of their old billboards, now faded and peeling, I remember the moment Bryce walked off that stage. Not with a bang. Not with a fight. But with the quiet realization that his empire had started to rot from the inside, and everyone could see it. Final words. If you've listened this far, you already know the truth about revenge. It's not about rage. It's about patience. It's about knowing when to speak, and when to let the silence do the work for you. I didn't destroy the Whitfields in one move. I just pulled one brick at a time until the whole wall came down. And when it did, I didn't need to stand in the rubble and gloat. I just walked away, with my head high and my hands clean.